Hello and welcome to Convin Conversations. I'm your host Ashish, CEO of Convin, a conversation intelligence platform for contact center setups. In today's episode of Convin Conversations, we have Rick with us. Rick is the director of call center operations, and he was leading the call center operations at Heartland Home Services, where amongst other amazing things, Rick created an in-depth quality assurance process to ensure a best-in-class call center experience. Rick is also an expert in operations with a proven record of exceeding objectives in a variety of cross-functional environments. He has over 12 years of experience in the management field, and we couldn't have been more glad to have someone talking about the specific topic that we have for Convin Conversations. Welcome to Convin Conversations, Rick. It's a pleasure having you.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Ashish.
Sure. In today's episode, Rick will be talking about typical quality management problems, right, that contact centers need to fix in 2023 as we are moving to a new era altogether. So I always like to, before we go into that topic, right, I always like to have my guest have this very little questions with them about how did they start their career? Where did they really start off? And how did they get to this position? So very happy to get to know your journey that you have had. And, probably our people who is listening to this podcast would be very happy to know that as well.
Okay. Yeah, I've thought about that question a lot in the past. And one of the things that I used to always think that my call center career started at Ford Motor Credit Company, but really it started when I was in college. I had a paid internship for a short amount of time working for a local cable company, and I was making outbound calls to customers and we were providing free upgrades to their cable service. So that's kind of where I started, but that helped me get into Ford Motor Credit Company. And when I started there, I was a outbound collector. So I was collecting on past due car payments. Which is quite the experience in itself, to call on people who were having some trouble with their car note. So I did that for a while, and then I moved my way up through the company doing a lot of customer service operations and supervisory roles. I was fortunate enough to be part of Ford Credit's launch team to help launch its first business center. And in that operation, it was a huge operation where we had multiple call centers from a variety of different departments like collections, customer service, loan originations, vehicle liquidations, account servicing. So I had a lot of experience there, really kind of bringing that call center up and running or helping it get up and running. So that was really fun and really, I learned an awful lot there. And then from there, I moved on to different project management roles and customer operation roles throughout the company. And that's really the bread and butter of my work experience.
It really started very early, right?
Yes.
How was it like in those days, right? I'm assuming this was like about 12 years ago or 15 years ago in sense, right?
Yeah. Well, yes. So in those days, when, as I mentioned about that contact center or the business center, when we launched that, that was the kind of the first introduction to kind of call center metrics, where we had call center metrics and we could kind of observe and see how we were doing rather than just by listening from afar on a phone call. So we had actual call center metrics, and we started introducing some new technologies that were, new voice recording technologies where we could record the call and see the screen and see all the mouse clicks and those types of things. So that technology was coming online, and it was really interesting as they did come available. As we're going through right now, new technologies are coming on all the time right now, and it's a really exciting time for the contact center space.
Right. That's very interesting. And I assume most of the activities at that point in time would be being done manually at lot, right? And now
absolutely.
That has largely changed to a lot of automation that is being done, correct?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, when I first started, I was picking up the phone and dialing it with my own fingers. And then when we went to the first business center operation, that's when we started using dialers and call routing systems and things of that nature. And that was new to the new technology at the time. But that's evolved dramatically since then.
Diving into today's topic of discussion, Rick, right? Quality management or let's say quality assurance in this whole contact center setup, right, has been the process of utilizing call monitoring to grade performance of agents, right? Mm-hmm. And you'd grade performance against the expectations that you have, right? That's largely the process today. Mm-hmm. But what is quality assurance in your view, and how important is it for a contact center setup?
Yeah, I think quality assurance is a key component to any call center operation. It's really a key component to any business operation if you consider quality assurance as a whole. But it's really more vital for the contact center world because, in most cases, especially from an inbound call center perspective, um, customers don't necessarily want to contact a contact center. They want to continue enjoying the product or the service that they're paying for or they already paid for. And the last thing they want to do is make a phone call or chat with someone or go online and do that with a company. So when they do have to do that, most often they're not always in the best mood or they might even be angry. So if you have a very robust quality assurance process in place where you're continually guiding your agents to reach that highest standard of quality that they present to the customer, it does a lot. It does a lot of things. First, it can get that service accurate. They can provide that accurate customer service right away and resolve a customer's issues in a timely manner. It can help dissolve or de-escalate customer anger and hopefully improve customer satisfaction. I see, really, from a customer service perspective, I see customer problems, a problem that a customer has is an opportunity. That's an opportunity for a company to address that issue for the customer, exceed their expectations, and make them want to do business with us again. Even though they may have a problem with their existing product or service, they know that they can call in and get that high quality service that they demand from the people that they're talking to resolve the issue and take care of things as appropriate.
That's a very interesting way of looking at it, right? So you're saying that in contact center setup, the whole quality assurance process can really drive a lot of these outputs, basically, right? And
Yes.
that was actually my second question also that I wanted to ask you is that, you think the quality assurance as a process really impact the customer experience and the agent performance both on both sides of the spectrum?
Oh, absolutely. If I see a quality assurance process as a tool, and it really as a training tool, an ongoing training tool. It's not a one-time use thing, right? So it's something not like training typically is. Typically, an agent comes in and they have a week or two of training before they're on the floor, before they're taking calls or making outbound calls, whatever it might be. And then they may have some ongoing training that's random and, spread out over, months and months of time. Well, quality assurance is that tool that extends that training. And if you have that quality assurance tool, that is a weekly or in some cases monthly reinforcement of the standards that and the expectations of an agent as they interact with those customers. So if you have a very robust tool that can help continually train that agent to provide that best-in-class customer service, it also is a tool to identify concerns that the customers are having. By recording these calls and addressing the customer issues and monitoring these calls, management can hear, recurring themes coming from customers as to what their issues are, what kind of questions the customers are asking. So not only can we provide that customer service, but we can hopefully, and I say hedge or be proactive about concerns that customers are having based on that quality monitoring process. By hearing those concerns of the customer, we can be proactive. Instead of waiting for something to break and the customer to call us, we can provide that information maybe via a website information or fix the problem before it becomes a recurring issue. And I think quality assurance, a good quality assurance process does both of those. It continues to educate the agents, and it's a direct connection to the customer's concerns and what kind of issues they're experiencing so that we can head those off before they become an issue.
That's a very interesting way to look at it. We'll get to how to solve the quality management, to improve CX and agent performance for sure. But let's look at what are the typical quality management problems that exist in a contact center setup, right? What, in your opinion, I would ask, are the typical problems in the whole quality management aspects of contact center setups?
Yeah, at the basic format, a lot of very small call center operations don't even have a quality assurance process, or they might have the capability to listen to a call, recorded a call every now and then, but they don't have necessarily a strong structure behind it, the structure to evaluate that call and the structure to provide feedback to that call. So So I think that is at the core, that's probably the biggest issue that people will experience. But even once you do have a quality assurance process in place, I think one of the big problems there is it's often can be perceived as a negative thing from the agents, because the agents may negatively perceive that as being in the middle of a painful IRS audit. Because ultimately that's what we're doing in the quality monitoring process. We're auditing their performance. However, it doesn't always have to be painful. And I think one of the mistakes that you see quite a bit, or that I've seen in the past, is using the quality assurance process as a tool to identify problems or errors that an agent has made. And I think that's the wrong way to approach it. We really have to use the quality assurance process as a tool to emphasize the positive aspects of the call, to really emphasize that aspect of it and congratulate the agent for a job well done on those specific characteristics of the call, or categories of the call, if you will. And then when there are opportunities or something that that didn't go so well, the feedback piece has to come in the form of, okay, this is an opportunity for you to work on next time. We're not going to beat you up about this call because it's already happened. There's nothing we can do to change that right now. That's in the past. So we got to look at it as going forward. This is we identify it as an opportunity, but going forward, these are ways that you can earn credit, if you will, for those types of questions or concerns in the future on future calls, right? And so by using it as an opportunity for the future, and then on top of that, and most importantly, providing a guide or training in order to help them reach that goal in the future, or turn that opportunity into a positive thing in the future, is crucial. So it's about I think in the past, people have used it as a tool to identify problems, and that's not it. It is, you do that, right? And that's important, but it's more about celebrating the good things that they did in the call, making it a learning opportunity for them, providing them with feedback so that they know what they're doing well and what the opportunities are, and then providing that direction for them, or giving them a path to success afterwards.
Makes sense. So you're looking at, one of the fundamental problems that you're suggesting that the quality management process in today's contact centers have, is they're just merely used as a tool to do the evaluation, and they're not used for the bigger picture, right? Which is, looking beyond what people are doing great, appreciating them, applauding them, right? Giving them feedback and figuring out the learning opportunities and training them, right? So it's just about currently only used as a tool to evaluate, but not to look beyond the evaluation. That's exactly one fundamental problem, right?
Yeah, it's being a tool used to criticize versus to provide constructional criticism, and I think there's a big difference in those two, right?
Fair point. The other problems that I have known of, and I would love to get those, understandings cleared with you, is that one problem is a sample size problem, which means that through the current ways of the way on how you do quality management in contact centers today, you're only able to look into 1% or even probably less than those calls. Right. So is that a problem in general for you or for any contact center manager or operations leader in that sense?
Yes, absolutely. In the past, I've worked with call centers that had a whole team of agents that did nothing but monitor calls. They monitored calls and when you're talking about a large contact center operation, when you've got 300 plus agents or 500 plus agents, it's a lot of monitoring that has to take place, and that consumes a lot of resources in order to do that. And I think the new technology is just like the technology that Convin has developed, that offers, that gives you the ability to, make a much larger sample size and provide feedback, is crucial to that operation. Because I think that interaction between the supervisor and the agent is super important. But if you combine that with tools such as AI tools and that nature that can monitor calls and provide feedback and training opportunities, it's a perfect match. And if you have both of those going on at the same time, you really benefit the not only the company with resource allocation, but also the agent with knowledge.
What do you think is the problem really with the sample size? Like, how does it create a problem? Is it about you get a very smaller or a very narrow picture because of very low sampling, or there is some other problem with the sampling?
Well, first of all, the sampling isn't always random. You can't. It's hard to do a random sample when you're doing it manually. I mean, you are just kind of picking a call, but generally speaking, a manager who's busy and doesn't have a lot of time to do these monitoring, they're not going to pick a 12-minute phone call. They're going to pick something that's more close to the average. They might pick a 4-minute phone call, because then they can listen to that phone call, score it, provide some feedback, and move on to the next one that they have to get in the long list of items that they have to collect, right? Whereas, sometimes you have a 12, 15-minute call, and that's usually a problem. Something big is going on there. And really, those are the calls that would be great for the managers to be monitoring and evaluating, right? But time is time, right? And so managers typically tend to choose those calls that are a little shorter in length or more closer to the average rather than doing the long ones. So that's one issue. Secondly, when you're talking to an agent that handles 100 calls a day, and you're only giving them 6 evaluations in a month, or even less in that case, that's not a very good sample size, and it really doesn't reflect their true performance. You might have, if you catch them on a bad day, that can destroy their quality assurance score for the month. And when you have such a small sample size like that. When you have a little bigger sample size, it levels out a little bit, and I think it tells a little better picture of the agent's performance.
Fair point.
Yeah.
And do you also think that the bias problem, which people have, you talked about it, like evaluating an average call or a shorter call, or in general, there are tons of different types of human biases involved. Does that pose a problem to the larger quality aspect of how people want to, like the purpose of having quality in place is very, very different, right? But do bias as a problem really impacts that?
I'm sure it does play a role. From a management perspective, if a manager has an employee that's or an agent that's constantly causing problems, maybe they're calling in sick all the time, and they might score their call a little more strict than they might someone who's more friendly and is nice to them or does well in other aspects of their job, right? So I think that bias definitely comes into play. I think it's almost impossible to avoid. It should be recognized, and that can help minimize it. But I think when you get into some of the technologies like you have, I think that eliminates some of that bias or decreases it substantially.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And let's say if I have to talk about, let's say that there is no bias in the world. Let's talk about an ideal world where there's no bias involved, right?
Right.
Do you still think that the consistency with which a manager is going to give feedback to people is going to be very consistent all the time, or that will vary? And
no, that's always going to vary. If the manager got a flat tire on the way to work, they're probably not going to be in the best mood when they're monitoring phone calls, and they might look at things a little differently. Their day might be, the way they interpret the day and the phone call might be a little different than if they had a great morning on the way into work and everything was lovely. That's just, it's maybe a bad example, but natural human bias and the mood of the evaluator definitely comes into play, as they go in and they evaluate a call, and it can be as little as time. It could be just a time issue. You might have the most consistent manager in the world, but if they're short on time, they're going to evaluate the call a little differently than they are if they've got a bunch of time. So, a lot of factors come into play when it comes to that evaluation process, for sure. And there's a lot of factors or variables that can, I don't want to say skew, well, maybe skew is the right word, that can skew the overall scores of the calls.
Understood. No, that makes sense. And how do you fix those problems? Now, we have talked about 3-4 problems. I'll summarize for everyone, right? One thing that you talked about is not like merely looking the whole quality management thing as a tool, but not looking beyond it on the larger value forms, right? That's one larger problem. The second problem is the sampling, right? The third problem is maybe bias, and the fourth problem may be consistency of the feedback that the agents are receiving. How do you solve each of these problem buckets, Rick?
Yeah, well, I think, I think the biggest thing is automation, right? If you can automate that monitoring process, that's a big way to eliminate many of those problems, right? You can increase your sample size if you automate it. You can reduce the bias if you do that, and you can increase consistency across the board if you do that. And I think automation is a wonderful tool, but I think it should be used in conjunction with continued supervisory and management evaluation as well. I think you have to have both in order for it to work properly, because you want to make sure that an agent isn't getting just their feedback from an artificial intelligence process. You need to have that management involved in that process as well. And the one way to involve management is to have them, in addition to using the tools like an AI quality assurance process. In addition to that, management has to do some calls themselves as well, even with all their biases and their small statistical sizes that they're getting. They still have to be involved. And I think when you have those two and you have that tool to increase that number of monitors and those number of evaluations is crucial to the whole process. It balances everything out, and then you still have that management involvement.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Understood. And apart from that, right? Let's say you have started solving these problem statements, and obviously you said that automation is something that can help a lot of those things, right? But if we have to talk about, the right piece of technology, it makes a lot of difference at different steps of the problem solving, right? A couple of categories that comes to my mind in the whole contact center setup is, first, let's say a call recording solution. You need to have something on that side. Then probably an auto QA solution is what we are talking about, I think, right now. And then in reporting, and then an agent coaching solution, right? Can you probably tell us a little bit more about these categories of solutions, right? In your knowledge, how a call recording solution from your experience has evolved, or how you have seen auto QA, if you have seen auto QA evolving, right? How does that worked out? If you can give us more lights on these kind of technologies.
Yeah, so when I first started, there was no call recording, and some of that it wasn't available, but there's a cost associated with it. So some companies, from a call center perspective, didn't, or from a business perspective, didn't have that call recording technology. So that call recording technology was the first huge step in that entire process, to be able to go back and listen to those calls after the fact, when management had time to do so, rather than sitting there with an agent and listening to them at the same time. It was a huge step as far as quality management is concerned. And then the ability to see the screen was a big step as well. I always say the example, we had an agent when we first introduced the screen recordings as well. We had an agent that put the customer on hold, went in and started scheduling her own vacation time while the customer was on hold. And we wouldn't have caught that had it been just the audio piece, right? Everything would have sounded fine on the audio. Maybe the hold was a little long, but to see her multitasking and scheduling her own vacation instead of helping the customer was an eye opener. And so having that screen recording is really crucial too. I think it's important. I don't want to say it's crucial, but it's important, and it's a real nice to have feature of that process. And then for the quality management, the automated quality assurance process, that's the next step. And in the early days, I wasn't a big fan, to be honest. The early days of that, it was awfully generic. It didn't get into the specifics of the call as much as it should have, and it couldn't think through the non-black and white items. Verifying address is one thing. That's pretty easy for an automated system to verify whether that was done or not. But to determine if the agent displayed the right amount of knowledge for a particular topic, that's a different ballgame. And I think the AI Convin, the product that you have developed, does that. It's able to identify, if the agent's using the right types of words and phrases to demonstrate the knowledge appropriate for the question that the customer asked. When you get to that level, then the automated processes are much smoother, much more reliable, and much more just a much better product, and provides that help. And then finally, the feedback piece is good too. There wasn't feedback initially, but to be able to have the feedback option is great. And when the feedback stuff first came on, it was, again, very generic and not very specific to really provide any real serious help for the agent, right? And I think, being able to direct the agent towards, training, approved training, or to listen to other people's calls, especially when it's their peers, is huge. When they can say, oh, well, Susie over here does this really well. You might want to listen to one of her calls, and here it is for you, and put it right on their computer screen for them in an instant is a huge benefit. And I'm really excited about that technology coming on board. I think that's wonderful, because the feedback, because to me, the main thing about the quality assurance process is, the goal is to make the agents better at their job, right? It's not to, bust them for doing something wrong. And it's not just to get information from the customer on a recorded line that we can use to better our business. That is a part of it, and both of those are part of it. But the ultimate goal is to improve the performance of the agent and make them get to a point where they're providing that best-in-class quality to their customers. So that feedback session, whatever form that comes in, if that's an automated session that provides them with training and feedback and tips, that's great. Or if it's that direct feedback from their manager to, having that interaction is helpful too. And at the very, very least, having an agent have the ability to listen to their own call and to self-critique is really powerful too. So, there's so many benefits that you can get from recording to monitoring and to providing the most important piece, which is that feedback to the agent to help them improve their performance.
Makes sense. Great. And I think this brings us to the end of the podcast, Rick, wherein, I think we had great questions and amazing answers by you. But before we end this up, are there any reading suggestions that you have which our audience can go through, learn more about all of these, things in their daily lives, and that probably become a better contact center manager in that sense?
Well, I think, from a contact center manager, there is a ton of readings and videos. I think I'm more of a fan of the videos, because the videos can be shared with other supervisors and other team members pretty quickly, and actually they can be used pretty quickly in a meeting. One of my favorites, and maybe you can attach this to the podcast, but one of my favorites, it's an old video, but it's called Remember Me. And it's a customer service video, and it's old. It's not new. It's really not a technology thing, but it really helps remind everybody the importance of the customer, and that Remember Me, the customer, is ultimately what they're working for, is to provide that best-in-class quality assurance to the customer, and to remember the customer, and to remember that even small little things and small phrases and things that they say and approaches that they take with the customer make a huge difference in that customer's perception of the company and whether or not they're going to continue to do business with you in the future.
Fair point. Makes sense. Thank you for all the time, Rick, that you have given us and this amazing session. It was very smooth, like a breeze, wherein we talked about multiple topics. And thank you for those amazing answers. And thank you again for coming on Convin Conversations. Good to have you.
Thanks, Ashish. I appreciate it.